I've shown in previous videos that my basement shop is pretty messy and disorganized. A common way to organize tools in a shop is to make a French cleat wall. I started by taking my 4x8 sheet of 3/4 inch plywood out to the patio so I could cut it in half with my circular saw. After all, this is the only way I can get it down into my basement. This first sheet of plywood will be what gets fastened to the wall to act as a base for all the cleats. But because you'll see the screws, I of course had to make sure that they were equally spaced along the sheet so it would look right. It would just throw the whole thing off if they didn't have proper spacing. I made sure to countersink all the screw heads in this sheet of plywood so they wouldn't interfere with the French cleats, since at this point I wasn't really sure where the cleats were going to line up. I drilled the first hole through the concrete block on the upper right side, just to hold the sheet of plywood up against the wall for me. I then used a level to match everything up, and used that to mark and drill the hole on the other side. Once those two screws were in place, I finished up with all the other anchor points. The other half sheet of plywood is cut into 4-inch strips, and these will be the basis for making all the cleats. Each of these strips will be cut in half at a 45-degree angle, which will result in 2 French cleats. It makes sense to set your fence to 2 inches to cut each of those 4-inch strips in half, but once you turn the blade on a 45-degree angle, it throws everything off. You have to add half the thickness of your piece onto that 2 inches. So I set my fence at 2 3/8 inches, which resulted in 2 equally sized cleats. The blade I used for cutting them on the table saw isn't really the highest quality though, so this resulted in some tear out along all of the pieces. So in the interest of not having a ton of splinters in my hands by the end of this project, I just went back with a sanding block and cleaned up all the pieces. My plan for attaching all the cleats to the wall was just using some countersunk screws again. Nothing fancy, but this meant once again that placement was key to avoid having them look messy. I took all of the cleats over to the drill press and set up a stop block in order to consistently drill all the pilot holes. I started by attaching the first cleat flush with the bottom edge of the plywood. I then set a strip of wood on top of that cleat and used it as a spacer to place the next cleat above it. This continued on until all of the cleats were in place. But now that the actual cleat wall is done, I have to come up with some kind of storage to hang on it. This is where my X-Tool D1 Pro laser engraver really came in handy. I used a free website called MakerCase that I'll link in the description. It allows me to design some small boxes that are held together by finger joints that I can use for organizing various tools on the French cleat wall. Once all the sides of the boxes are cut out, they can be glued and clamped together. Making a box this way also has the added benefit of allowing me to label it with the laser engraver so that I can see what the box contains no matter how high I might place it up on the French cleat wall. By hanging an upside down French cleat from the back of this box, I can hang it on the French cleat wall when it's not in use. If we rewind time, while the laser engraver was cutting out the box, I was working on building a storage for saw blades. It's really nice to be able to work on another project while the laser engraver is doing something for you. It just feels like you're doubling your productivity. I cut out a bunch of dados and a couple small sheets of plywood. These dados would hold all of the shelves for the individual saw blades. The box was assembled with wood glue and brad nails, which worked out just fine and was simple enough, except when you forget to charge the battery to the brad nailer. I used the table saw and the miter saw to cut the shelving out of this 1/8 inch thick Hardybacker board. I wanted to cut out a notch on the front of all the shelves just to make it easier to grab the saw blades. So I used the laser engraver to cut out a template that would allow me to trace the shape of the notch. I then cut that out on the bandsaw and then slotted all of the shelves into the box. And just to be safe, I added an extra cleat on the bottom of the box to help give it more support. I employed the use of the 3D printer by making some DeWalt battery mounts. I found this design for free on the Printables website that I will link in the description below. I used the laser engraver to make a smaller box that fits right inside the wood glue box and can be used upside down as an organizer. And if you aren't familiar with these accessories, you owe it to yourself to buy these. The brushes here in particular are extremely handy because you don't even have to clean up the glue. You just wait for it to dry and then peel it off, since it doesn't stick to the silicone tip. There are a lot of other organizers that I'll need to design and make, since I still have a lot of space left on the French cleat wall, and also still have a lot of things to store. Let me know in the comments below if you'd like to see another video on some French cleat storage ideas. And in the meantime, keep on learning new things and renovating your mind.